world is closely watching developments in Sri Lanka as political chaos ensued from an economic meltdown. Here's what we know. Sri Lanka has been declared bankrupt by its own prime minister as it struggles with a severe foreign exchange shortage, leaving millions struggling to buy food, medicine, and fuel. This is the country's worst economic crisis since gaining independence in 1948. Inflation in Sri Lanka soared to a record high of 54.6% last month, and this is expected to hit 70% in the coming months. The financial crisis triggered months of largely peaceful anti-government protests, which escalated over the weekend when tens of thousands of protesters stormed the presidential palace and set fire to the prime minister's home. Due to intense pressure, Sri Lanka's president Gotabaya Rajapaksa escaped via a naval ship and vowed to resign on Wednesday. Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe has also expressed his willingness to resign.
How far is the Philippines from reaching the same economic situation as Sri Lanka? To discuss this, we have One News Business Editor Regina Lay joining us via Zoom. Reg, welcome to The Big Story.
Good evening, Robbie and Sean.
I mean, of course, Reg, everybody's following Sri Lanka. On the one hand, there's this obviously something extraordinary happening there. Literally running out of fuel, literally running out even of cooking oil for the population, 54% inflation. But what do people need to understand about the situation in Sri Lanka, and particularly how different it is from the Philippines?
Well, I guess the first thing I would say is don't panic. We have talked to economists about this, and they all say that, there are at least three good reasons why the situation in Sri Lanka is, far removed from us, and it's not going to happen here. The first very important reason is most of Sri Lanka's debt is to foreign creditors like China. Most of our debt is local. I think to the tune of about 70% or so, which means we're not at the mercy of foreign institutions or foreign countries, right? Number two, because of years of mismanagement, Sri Lanka was left with hardly any foreign reserves. I think the last time I checked, it was just $25 million, if you can believe that, which means they can't afford to import food and fuel, as you pointed out, let alone pay the interest on their billions of dollars in loans, right? The Philippines, on the other hand, has more than $100 billion in reserves in the bank. That's worth about more than 8 months worth of our own imports. So we're covered for at least 8 months if, knock on wood, something happens, right? And the third important reason is that, look, the Philippine economy is just much bigger than Sri Lanka's. We have more exports. We have a thriving BPO industry, which brings in dollars. And most importantly, we have OFW remittances. Sri Lanka, of course, also exports its labor. They have overseas workers too, but it's a far smaller industry than in the Philippines. So I think the bottom line here is, I think when you talk about the situation in Sri Lanka happening to the Philippines, it's a bit of an apples to oranges comparison, Robbie.
Okay.
All right, Reg, the Prime Minister and the President have both said they will be resigning, but what happens after that? I mean, where is Sri Lanka headed?
Sean, look, there's so much that they need to fix in the country. First, they're going to have to install a new government, obviously one that will gain the people's trust back. We know that at this point, the country is in talks with the IMF for a bailout. We'll see what comes of that. I think they need $60 billion just to survive the next several months. They're talking to countries like the US and Japan have also donated hundreds of millions of dollars in aid. Sri Lanka has also gone to India and China for some help as well. The Prime Minister, Wickremesinghe, also told AP that they will consider buying oil from Russia instead from now on, since Russia is selling it much cheaper now. So basically, the first thing that they need to do is clean up the house. First install a government, a new government that the people can trust, and then from there, one by one, pick up the pieces of the economy.
All right, thank you so much for your time and your insights. One News's business editor, Regina Lay. Thanks, Reg.